The train station smelled the same. Rain on old stone, soot from the engines, a faint trace of sugar from sweets long since eaten. Hermione Granger stood still on platform 934, clutching the handle of her suitcase tighter than necessary. She was 19. She'd survived a war. And yet, Hogwarts still made her stomach twist like she was 11 again. Except this time, she wasn't coming back to learn spells. She was coming back to heal. Around her, other students, older, thinner, war-worn, filtered toward the train. Some walked with limp wands. Others didn't meet her eyes at all. The ministry called it the reintegration year, a chance to finish what they'd all been cheated out of. But it felt more like a truce. Temporary. Fragile. Harry and Ron weren't returning. Ron had decided one more year of school sounded like torture, and Harry had enough on his plate with the Aura program. She didn't blame them. But it meant she was alone. Again. She stepped onto the train and made her way to a compartment, expecting to spend the ride buried in a book. She slid the door open and froze. Draco Malfoy was already there. He sat by the window in his pressed black coat, legs crossed, one hand tapping against his knee like he'd rather be anywhere else. When he looked up, his grey eyes locked onto hers and didn't flinch. "What?" he said flatly. "No welcoming party." Hermione's grip tightened on the doorframe. "There are 6 other compartments. Choose one." He didn't move. "This one has the best view." "Malfoy," she warned. His mouth curled in something between a smirk and a sneer. "Relax, Granger. I'm not here to start a war. At least not without my wand." That shouldn't have made her pause. But it did. Because she saw it now, the empty wand holster at his side. No wand. Just a boy who used to be dangerous. Now? Just tired. She slid into the seat across from him anyway. The train pulled out of the station, and silence filled the space between them. The castle loomed the same as ever, but something about it felt different. Haunted. Too many windows where laughter should have echoed now stood cold and quiet. The great hall felt smaller. And the sorting hat for once didn't sing. After dinner, Professor McGonagall summoned Hermione and a few other returning students to the front of the hall. Her voice carried with calm authority. "As part of our reintegration program, some of you will be asked to take leadership roles. Encourage unity. Rebuild trust. These roles will be paired. Chosen, deliberately." Hermione lifted her chin. Of course she would be chosen. "Miss Granger," McGonagall said. "You will be co-leading our unity sessions." Hermione nodded. "Yes, headmistress." "Your partner," she added, "will be Mr. Malfoy." It was as if the air had been sucked from the room. Hermione blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "Mr. Malfoy has agreed to participate in full. The Ministry believes it vital that former enemies learn to work together." Malfoy's voice cut through the stunned hush like velvet laced with venom. "How touching." Hermione turned toward him, eyes narrowed. "You can't be serious." "Oh, but I am," McGonagall said. "Think of it as poetic punishment." Hermione's fists curled at her sides. Malfoy's expression didn't change, but his eyes for a moment looked almost amused. Or terrified. Later that night, Hermione stormed into the abandoned classroom where they'd been told to meet. "You planned this," she hissed. Draco barely looked up from the dusty desk where he sat, legs stretched out, arms folded behind his head. "Please, if I had a say in anything, do you think I'd be stuck spending my evenings with you?" She marched toward him. "Then why accept it?" "Because unlike you," he said, sitting up, "I have things to make up for." Hermione's breath caught. "Don't mistake this for some kind of truce," she said after a long pause. His eyes met hers, dark, unreadable. "Wouldn't dream of it." And yet something in the room shifted. The heat of resentment. The weight of shared history. The unspeakable fact that, against all reason, neither of them had walked away. Hermione was never late. But when she walked into the first Unity session 5 minutes behind schedule, she found Malfoy already seated in the circle of conjured chairs, legs crossed, tapping his wand on his knee with practiced indifference. His platinum hair was slightly tousled, like he hadn't slept, but the tailored robes he wore were crisp as ever. "Nice of you to join us, Granger," he murmured as she passed. She didn't dignify him with a reply. Instead, she addressed the group, 7 students, all survivors, all visibly uncomfortable. Some were Slytherins, some Gryffindors. One Hufflepuff sat stiffly beside a Ravenclaw girl with healing scars on her neck. "Thank you all for coming," Hermione began, projecting calm. "These sessions are meant to foster dialogue and healing, a safe place to speak freely." "Sounds awful," muttered someone in the back. Malfoy chuckled. "Don't worry, she's very good at telling people how to feel." Hermione turned her head slowly. "If you're not going to contribute, you can leave." He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on her. "Oh, I plan to contribute. I'm just curious whether unity means pretending none of us tried to kill each other last year." The air went still. One of the students shifted uncomfortably. Hermione kept her voice level. "It means acknowledging that and choosing to move forward." Malfoy tilted his head. "So we lie with better intentions." "That's enough," she snapped, losing the professional edge. He grinned. "There she is." After the session, an awkward, sputtering affair filled with silence and half-hearted admissions, Hermione stayed behind to clean up. Chairs vanished with flicks of her wand, parchments organized themselves into neat stacks. She was halfway through when she heard the door click shut behind her. "Didn't think you'd stay this late," Draco said, voice low. She turned. He stood just inside the door, arms folded, watching her like a puzzle he'd been told not to solve. "I'm thorough," she replied curtly. "Something you clearly aren't familiar with." He smirked, stepping closer. "No, I'm very thorough, just not obedient." Hermione's jaw clenched. "You enjoy making this harder than it needs to be. I enjoy watching you squirm while pretending you're above it all." She raised her wand without thinking. "Don't push me." To her surprise, he stepped closer, deliberately into the path of her spell. "Or what?" he murmured. "You'll hex me, hurt me, like I deserve." His words startled her more than his proximity. There was no arrogance in them. No mockery. Just a bitter exposed truth hanging between them. "Stop it," she whispered. But he was already too close. "You don't know what it's like," he said. "To wake up every day and be grateful you weren't cursed, only hated. To be allowed back here as a symbol. A test case. The Ministry's pet project." "I do know what it's like," she snapped. To carry guilt. To carry expectations. The whole world watching, waiting for you to stumble. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then his voice dropped, so quiet it barely reached her. "Then maybe you're the only one who does." She should have stepped back. Should have turned away. Instead, she stayed rooted to the floor, aware of how close he was. Of the tension simmering just under her skin. Of the heat in his breath as it ghosted near her cheek. "Don't," she said again, but it came out breathless. He didn't touch her. Didn't move closer. But he didn't move away either. "I'm not going to kiss you, Granger," he said, voice rough. "You'd hate me for it." Her heart pounded. "You're damn right I would." But she didn't step back. And neither did he. That night, Hermione lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The image of Draco's face, too close, too serious, burned in her mind. Not because of what he'd said, but because she'd wanted him to kiss her. Just for a second. Just to see if it would feel as wrong as it should. The second Unity session began with a wand misfire and ended with shouting. Not from Draco this time, from Seamus Finnegan, who had been pushed too far by Blaise Zabini's smug comment about whose side really won the war. The explosion of magic that followed sent 3 chairs stumbling and singed the sleeves off a poor fourth-year observer. Hermione doused the flames with a flick of her wand, her voice sharp with command. "Enough!" Everyone froze. And then, slowly, one by one, the students slunk out, whispering to themselves and shooting glances that said this is exactly why it will never work. Draco stayed behind. Of course he did. He'd watched the whole thing with clinical detachment, like it was a chessboard falling apart. Hermione rubbed her temples, pacing across the room. This isn't working, obviously, he muttered. Could you be helpful for once in your life? He rose to his feet. Define helpful. She turned on him, hair a mess, nerves frayed. Maybe not treating every moment like it's a game you're too clever to lose. He walked toward her, slow, calculated, unbothered. I'm not trying to win, Granger. I already lost. Something in her deflated at that. She sat down hard on the nearest desk, suddenly exhausted. You know, I thought being back here would feel like coming home. But it doesn't. Draco leaned against the wall, arms folded. No, it feels like the ruins of one. Their eyes met again. Not with fury this time, but with something stranger. A mutual understanding. A shared ache. Hermione's voice softened. I don't know how to fix this. He tilted his head. You always had a plan. I thought I did. Silence stretched between them. Heavy, but not empty. Then, suddenly, the air shimmered. A flicker of leftover spellwork from the earlier scuffle began to pulse on the wall behind them, unstable, sparking. Hermione turned too fast, wand at the ready. But she slipped. It happened in a second. Her foot caught the corner of the desk, and the floor rushed up to meet her. She braced herself, but never hit. Arms caught her. Firm. Familiar. She looked up. Draco. They were chest to chest, his grip tight around her waist, her breath caught somewhere between panic and something else. His voice was low, a whisper near her ear. You all right? She nodded too fast. Yes, let go. But he didn't. Not yet. Their eyes locked again, and this time there was no hate in it. No snide remarks. Just a tension so thick it wrapped around them like invisible vines. Granger, he said, quieter now. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her hands were still on his shoulders, and she was acutely aware of how strong they were. How steady. This shouldn't be happening, she whispered. I know, he let go first. She stepped back like she'd been burned. That night she dreamed of fire. Not the kind that destroyed, but the kind that danced too close to your skin and dared you to reach for it anyway. She woke up sweating. The next day she avoided him in the corridors. In the Great Hall. In the library. But he didn't seem to mind. In fact, he smirked every time their eyes accidentally met. As if he knew something she refused to admit. As if he was waiting for her to break first. The library had always been Hermione's sanctuary. Shelves like battlements. Books like spells. Quiet that felt like control. But tonight that control shattered the moment Draco Malfoy walked in. She was seated in the restricted section, cross-legged in an armchair, reading about magical trauma suppression spells for the next Unity session. She didn't look up when he entered. She wanted him to know he was being ignored. It didn't work. You always did enjoy rules, didn't you? He said, his voice soft in the aisle beside her. Even when breaking them. She turned a page without flinching. Don't you have someone else to haunt? Draco slid into the chair across from her, casually draping his arm over the back, like he had every right to be there. I tried the astronomy tower, but all the ghosts were boring tonight. She refused to look up. Some people come here to think. Some people come here to hide. Her eyes flicked to his. What would I be hiding from? He leaned forward, voice dropping. Me. The air shifted. Something unspoken bloomed between them, dark and sweet and dangerous. Hermione shut her book. Whatever game you think this is, I'm not playing it. I think you already are. Don't flatter yourself. He grinned. I wouldn't dare. But tell me, did you think about it? That night. In the classroom. Her stomach tightened. There was nothing to think about. He tilted his head. Then why did you look like you wanted to kiss me? Her breath caught. Too fast. Too obvious. You're delusional. Maybe, he said softly. But not wrong. She stood abruptly, clutching the book to her chest. You don't get to do this. Do what? He asked, rising too. Talk to you like I know you. You don't know me. I know what you sound like when you're trying not to breathe. He stepped closer. She backed up. I know the way your hands tremble when you're furious, the way you hold your wand like it's a weapon and a shield at the same time. Stop. I know, he whispered, closing the space between them, that you've thought about it. Just once. What it would feel like to let go. Her back hit the bookshelf. Draco hovered inches away, taller, dangerous, and still so maddeningly calm. She could feel his breath. Smell the faint trace of something clean and sharp, cypress and frost. Her voice broke. This isn't real. It could be. Why? She whispered. So you can say you conquered the mudblood after all. His face changed. All traces of smugness vanished. You think that's what this is? He asked, voice hoarse. You think I'd risk this to humiliate you? Hermione stared at him, eyes blazing. I think you don't know how to want something without ruining it. His mouth twitched. A sad, bitter smile. Then maybe we're not so different. He reached up, very slowly, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. She flinched, but she didn't stop him. He leaned in. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like the world stopped spinning. His lips hovered a breath from hers. Then I can't, she whispered. He pulled back. Nodded once. Neither of them spoke. She turned and left, her footsteps echoing through the quiet. Draco remained in the aisle, staring at the place where she'd stood. His hands curled into fists. The next day brought rain. The kind that soaked the grounds, flooded the greenhouses, and turned the castle corridors into echoing tunnels of dripping stone. It also brought an owl to Hermione at breakfast. Detention. She read the note once, then again. Granger, due to the incident during your last Unity session and the general decline of civil cooperation, you and Mr. Malfoy will serve joint detention tonight. Greenhouse 4. 9 p.m. Joint detention. Of course. He'd probably find this funny. The rain hadn't let up by the time Hermione arrived, soaked from the knees down and clutching her cloak tighter. Greenhouse 4 glowed dimly from within, lit by floating orbs of magic that flickered like fireflies. Draco was already there. Naturally. He was leaning against a work table, sleeves rolled up, damp hair pushed back, wand in one hand, and looking like he'd been carved out of frustration and shadows. Took you long enough, he said, voice low. I'd better places to be, she replied. Then why are you here? I'm not the one with a record of dodging detention. He arched a brow. But when we're paired, I show up. Hermione's temper flared. Is this some kind of game to you? No, he said, stepping toward her. That's the problem. She turned away, grabbing a pair of dragonhide gloves from the shelf. We're supposed to be repotting fire blossoms. Let's just get this over with. They worked in silence. Sort of. Every time their hands brushed in the soil, she tensed. Every time he exhaled too close, her breath caught. The greenhouse felt warmer than it should have. Humid, heavy, charged. At one point, she knocked over a pot. Draco caught it before it shattered. You're distracted, he said, not mocking for once. I'm exhausted, she snapped. He set the pot down carefully. You're scared. She whirled around. Of what, you? No, he said softly. Of what this could mean. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his face in stark silver blue. He looked nothing like the boy she remembered. Too much had been broken and reforged. I'm not scared, she said, voice shaking. I'm furious. Why? Because I shouldn't feel anything when you look at me like that. And yet? She stepped back into the table. Trapped. Draco moved closer. Rain slammed against the glass. Thunder rolled above them. He leaned in slowly, like testing a spell that might explode. You think I don't feel it too? I don't care what you feel. Liar, she shoved him. He caught her wrists. The contact was electric. You hate me, he murmured. I should. Then why are you trembling? She didn't answer. Because she didn't know. He let go, breath ragged. Say the word and I'll stop. She stared at him. Her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Say the word. but it stuck in her throat. He leaned in again, almost close enough to kiss her. Almost. She turned her head at the last second, eyes squeezed shut. Draco exhaled like it cost him something. Then he stepped back. "This shouldn't be happening," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "But here we are." That night, Hermione lay awake again. Rain still tapping the windows. One hand curled around her wand, the other curled around a memory of his breath on her skin. They were assigned to the Forbidden Forest as punishment. Apparently, Professor Sprout had complained about the condition of the fire blossoms, and McGonagall, clearly fed up, had delegated a new, restorative task. Collect Moonvine under supervision for the potions stores. At night, during a full moon. Fantastic, Hermione muttered as she pulled her cloak tighter. Because nothing says reconciliation like throwing two unstable war survivors into a forest full of acromantulas and trauma. Draco smirked beside her. "We're being trusted. Isn't that what you always wanted?" She shot him a glare. "Don't twist my values into your entertainment." "I'm not," he said, surprising her with the sincerity in his voice. "I just find it funny, in a bleak, twisted, existentially depressing kind of way." They walked in silence after that, crunching twigs underfoot and following the glowing trail of Moonvine through the underbrush. The light shimmered with soft silver hues, just enough to guide them deeper into the trees. Hermione was the first to break the silence. "Why did you come back?" He didn't answer at first. "Then, I didn't want the last place I ever felt safe to become a grave." She glanced at him. He wasn't looking at her, just watching the path, jaw tight. "Even after everything?" she asked softly. "Especially after everything." Another long pause. Then she said, "I came back because I was afraid I didn't know who I was outside of this place." He looked at her now. Really looked. "And who are you now?" She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't know. They found the Moonvine wrapping itself around the base of a fallen tree, its petals pulsing like a heartbeat. Hermione bent to collect it. As she reached, her sleeve rode up, just enough for Draco to see the thin, pale scar running down her inner forearm. She froze. His voice was a whisper. "Was that—" "Yes." Her tone turned brittle. "Snatcher's blade. April 98. I barely got the blood off the floor." Draco didn't speak. Hermione looked up. "Go on, say something clever." But he didn't look smug. He looked wrecked. "I saw the file," he said, voice raw. "After the war? The ministry let us review them, the ones about the camps. Your name was in it. Multiple times." Her throat tightened. "I didn't know that. I read it all," he continued, barely above a whisper. "Every word. Torture techniques. Names of the victims. Of the dead. Yours wasn't on that list." His eyes met hers. "But it should have been. And I don't know why it still matters to me that it wasn't." Hermione stared at him, stunned. Not by the words, but by the fact that he meant them. He sat beside her on the forest floor without asking. For a long moment they just sat in the quiet, surrounded by whispering trees and distant howls. Then he said, "I still hear them. The screams. At night." "Me too." He looked at her. "What do you do when it gets too loud?" She hesitated. "I go to the library. I read until my eyes hurt. Or I take dreamless sleep. Sometimes I just sit on the floor and wait for morning." He nodded slowly. "I try to forget," he said. "But the forgetting feels worse than the remembering." Hermione didn't think. She just reached over and touched his hand. Lightly. Fingers brushing fingers. He didn't pull away. The forest faded for a moment. All the noise, all the past, all the chaos, gone. Just two people sitting in the dark, sharing a silence that didn't demand anything. When they returned to the castle, neither of them spoke again. But Hermione felt something inside her shift. Not because Draco had shared something, but because for the first time since the war ended, she didn't feel alone. Hermione didn't speak to Draco for 2 days. Not because she was angry, or ashamed, because she didn't know what to say. How do you go back to hating someone after they've shown you the cracks in their armor? After they've quietly held the weight of your scars without asking to be forgiven? She buried herself in work. Read late. Avoided the library. Skipped meals. But her body gave her away, an ache in her chest every time she passed him in the corridor, a flicker in her pulse when she heard his voice from across the great hall. She didn't even realize she was standing outside Greenhouse 4 again until she heard footsteps behind her. "You miss me already, Granger," she turned. Draco. He looked different somehow, less pale, more guarded. She lifted her chin. "You're late for your Unity session review. I thought you liked having the room to yourself." She said nothing. He took a step closer. "You've been avoiding me. You've been watching." His mouth quirked, but there was no real humor in it. "We're very bad at pretending nothing happened." Hermione looked away. "It's easier that way." "For who?" Silence. Then from behind them, "Well, this is cozy." Hermione froze. "Ron." He stood a few paces away, arms crossed, eyes narrowed at Draco with familiar loathing. "What the hell is this?" he asked sharply. Hermione moved quickly. "Ron, no, I'd love to hear it." "You and him? Talking? Meeting? Is that what this year's about? Romantic field trips with Death Eaters?" Draco didn't flinch. He just straightened and looked Ron in the eye. "Easy, Weasley. No one's proposing anything." Ron's jaw clenched. "You don't get to talk to me. And you don't get to decide who she speaks to." The air snapped like a hex had been cast. Hermione stepped between them. "Stop it, both of you." Ron turned to her, face flushed. "You're defending him." "I'm stopping a fight," she said, voice level. "I don't owe you an explanation, Ron." He stared at her like he didn't recognize her. Then quietly, "Maybe not, but you used to hate him." Hermione swallowed. "Maybe I still do." She didn't turn around until Ron was gone. Draco was still standing there, still watching her. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know, but you did." He shrugged, but it wasn't casual. "Someone should." She nodded once. "Thank you." And then, without thinking, she reached out and touched his hand again. Brief. Bah. Enough to say everything they couldn't say aloud. That night, she lay in bed, tracing her lips with her fingers, trying to remember the last time she'd been touched with something that wasn't anger or fear, and trying not to imagine what his mouth might feel like pressed to hers. Hermione was summoned to McGonagall's office just before dinner. She climbed the spiral staircase slowly, dread coiling in her stomach like a living thing. The last time she'd been called here like this, she was being asked to help rebuild Hogwarts. To lead. This felt different. The headmistress stood behind her desk, hands folded tightly, spectacles glinting in the late afternoon sun. "Miss Granger," she began without preamble, "your work this term has been exemplary. Your leadership tireless. But," she paused carefully, "it has not gone unnoticed that your involvement with Mr. Malfoy has extended beyond professional obligation." Hermione's heart thudded. "We're co-leaders. Of course we've spent time together." McGonagall's gaze sharpened. "There are reports." Whispers. Students talking. Staff concerned. "I understand the desire to bridge divides. But some divides are not meant to be crossed so personally." Hermione lifted her chin. "Are you saying I shouldn't speak to him?" "I'm saying your reputation, your future, may suffer from certain associations. You've worked too hard to have it overshadowed by sentiment." "Sentiment," Hermione repeated. The word tasted bitter. McGonagall's voice softened. "You are allowed to care, but be careful. The world may not be ready to see a war hero and a war criminal on equal footing." Hermione left without answering. She didn't go to dinner. She went straight to the old classroom, their classroom, and slammed the door behind her. Draco was already there. As if he knew she'd come. He looked up from a battered notebook, but whatever he saw on her face made him straighten immediately. "What happened?" She threw her bag down. "They told me to stay away from you." He blinked.
Who? McGonagall.
The Ministry. The whispers in the halls. Apparently, I'm jeopardizing my future by being seen with you. His jaw tightened. And you're angry because I hate that they might be right, she snapped. I hate that I've spent my whole life doing everything right, following every rule, and the second I make one personal decision, I'm suddenly a liability. Draco watched her, unmoving. Hermione's hands were shaking now. You were supposed to be simple. Easy to avoid. Easy to hate. But you're not. She stepped closer. You make me question things I thought were certain. You make me want to break the rules I spent my whole life building. He stood too, voice low. Then break them. I can't. Yes, you can. She took a step forward. You still think I'm afraid of you? No, he said, inching closer. I think you're afraid of yourself. Of what? Of wanting something that could ruin you. Her breath caught. He was close now. Closer than before. She could smell the parchment and pine on his skin. She whispered, And you're not afraid? His voice came like a confession. I'm terrified. And then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was months of tension. Years of hate. Weeks of stolen glances and lightning-struck silences. Her hands fisted in his shirt. His fingers tangled in her hair. Their bodies collided like a spell misfired. Too much, too fast, too hot. He lifted her onto the desk. She pulled him in harder. But just as quickly she broke the kiss, breathless, heart pounding. We shouldn't, I know. Neither moved. Their foreheads touched, lips parted, breathing in sync. Neither ready to let go. Hermione didn't sleep that night. Not because she regretted kissing him. Because she didn't. She thought she would. She thought she'd wake up with the weight of shame pressed into her ribs. But instead all she felt was heat. Coiled deep. Waiting. His mouth had burned her. His hands had steadied and shaken her all at once. She couldn't get the sound of his breath out of her head. Or the way he whispered her name like it was both apology and invitation. She didn't see him the next morning. Or in Charms. Or at lunch. He'd vanished again, like he used to. Slipping between shadows and silence, avoiding attention. By the time evening fell, she was pacing the empty Unity room like a caged thing. He entered without a word. Closed the door. Locked it with a flick of his wand. Hermione froze. He stood there, rain-soaked, breathing hard like he'd run all the way from the dungeons. Neither of them spoke. Then, I thought you were avoiding me, she said, voice tight. I was. Why? Because if I saw you again, I'd do it again. She swallowed. Then why did you come? He stepped forward. Slowly. Because I don't want to pretend anymore. Her heart slammed against her ribs. This is a mistake. Probably. You'll ruin everything. I'm good at that. His hand brushed her cheek, soft, reverent, almost scared. I don't want to ruin you, Granger, he whispered. But I'm not strong enough to stay away. Her lips parted. Then don't. That was all it took. He kissed her again, deeper this time. Less fury. More hunger. A controlled burn that flared the moment her fingers tangled in his collar. He backed her against the wall, hands sliding under her jumper, tracing her waist like a map he'd only dreamed of reading. Hermione gasped into his mouth as his lips trailed down her neck. I shouldn't want this, she murmured. I know. His teeth grazed her collarbone. Tell me to stop. I can't. Her jumper hit the floor. His shirt followed. They were fire and thunder and denial undone. Her fingers slipped into his hair. His mouth moved lower. But just as his hand found the clasp of her bra, something broke. Her breath hitched. He froze, pulled back just enough to see her face. Too fast? He asked, voice hoarse but steady. She nodded once. Barely. He stepped back immediately, chest heaving. Okay, silence. And then she laughed, shaky, breathless. Gods, we're a mess, he smirked, still out of breath. We're better than we were. She walked toward him and pressed her forehead to his. I want you, but not yet. Not like this. He nodded, eyes closed. Then I'll wait, however long it takes. And he meant it. Hermione didn't return to her dorm that night. She stayed in the Unity room long after Draco left, pacing the worn floor, heart still thundering in her chest. The ghost of his hands lingered on her skin. Her lips still tingled with the weight of his kiss. She could still hear his voice, rough, breathless, tell me to stop. And the worst part, she hadn't wanted to. The next morning, she found him sitting alone on the astronomy tower. He was staring out at the horizon like he'd been there all night. You look like hell, she said softly, sitting beside him. Didn't sleep. Me either. He glanced at her. Too many dreams? She shook her head. Too many memories. They sat in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Familiar. Safe. Hermione looked down at her hands, then over at his. Last night, I didn't stop because I didn't want you. He looked at her, quiet, waiting. I stopped because I've spent so long not feeling anything. Not letting anyone touch me without flinching. And then you... He swallowed hard. I would never... I know, she cut in gently. I know you wouldn't. That's what scared me. She reached over and slid her fingers through his. His hand curled instinctively around hers, thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. It was the softest thing he'd ever done. She leaned her head against his shoulder. If we do this, it's going to destroy everything we built to survive. He exhaled. Maybe, but maybe it's the only real thing left. They stayed like that until the bells chimed for first class. Neither of them moved. That week passed in fragments. Stolen glances across the great hall. Hands brushing under tables during Unity sessions. Whispered words exchanged behind shelves in the library. They didn't kiss again. But the energy between them was constant, like a thread pulled tight between two cliffs, humming with pressure. Every time she spoke, he watched her mouth. Every time he laughed, real laughter, rare and rough, her knees went weak. He was still Draco. Arrogant. Dry. Infuriating. But she saw more now. The way he softened around first years. The way he lingered near Luna during meals, watching her closely, protectively. The way he stopped calling her Granger when no one else was around. One evening, she found a folded piece of parchment tucked into her bag. Midnight. Library. Restricted section. Don't be late. She didn't ask how he got it in there. She just showed up. He was already waiting, perched on the edge of the table like sin in shadows. Candlelight kissed his cheekbones. His shirt sleeves were rolled up again. You always come when I call, he said with a smirk. She dropped her bag beside him. You like to pretend you're dangerous. I am. Not to me. He stood. Close the distance. You're wrong, he said, voice low. You're the only one I'm dangerous to. Her breath caught. Why? Because you make me want things I don't deserve. She stepped closer. Then earn them. His eyes flicked to her mouth. I'm trying. She lifted her chin. Try harder. They didn't kiss. But his fingers traced the edge of her jaw. Her heartbeat stuttered beneath his touch. Then he pulled away. You're going to kill me, he whispered. She smiled, sad and sure. Not before you kill me first. Rumours had a way of finding cracks. Hermione noticed it first during breakfast. Lavender Brown whispering into Ginny's ear. A glance. A smirk. A pause when Hermione caught their eyes. Then, in the corridor, two Ravenclaw girls froze mid-conversation as she passed, then turned to look back at her. One of them said something that sounded an awful lot like Malfoy. By dinner, it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a hum. Like the castle itself could feel it, that something forbidden had taken root, and the vines were winding through the cracks in the walls. She cornered Draco in the east corridor after lights out. What did you do? She hissed, dragging him into an alcove. He blinked. Good evening to you too. People are talking. They always talk. This is different. His eyes narrowed. Did someone say something to you? Hermione shook her head. Not directly, but it's coming. I can feel it. Draco exhaled through his nose. Let me guess. Weasley's been glowering across the Great Hall like a kicked hippogriff again. He hasn't spoken to me since that night. And Granger the hero can't stand being publicly disgraced. Don't, she snapped, stepping closer. Don't twist this into something petty. Then what is it? He demanded. Because from where I'm standing, you're fine with sneaking around as long as no one actually sees you wanting me. The words hit like a slap. She went still. That's not fair, isn't it? Hermione's voice dropped. You think this is easy for me? You think I don't lie awake every night wondering what the hell I'm doing? I'm scared, Draco. He stared at her. Then quietly, so am I, silence. Then she whispered, It's not that I don't want you. It's that I don't know what happens after. He stepped forward, closing the gap. Then stopped thinking about after. And just like that, the heat returned. Between them, around them, inside them. He touched her waist. Her breath caught. But before either of them could give in, footsteps. Fast. Close. They broke apart just as Pansy Parkinson rounded the corner, wand lit. Well, well, she drawled. What have we here? Hermione's heart thundered. Draco's hand hovered inches from his wand. Patrolling, Granger, Pansy smirked. Or just fraternizing? I'm on head girl rounds, Hermione lied smoothly. Malfoy was walking me back. Pansy said, eyes narrowing. Funny, you're nowhere near the Gryffindor Tower. Hermione crossed her arms. Neither are you. Pansy held up a parchment. Prefect duty. Actual one. Funny how that works. Her eyes flicked between them, lingering too long. Then she smiled. Sweet. Sharp. Be careful, Granger. People might start thinking you've developed questionable taste. Draco didn't move. Hermione stepped forward. Let them. Pansy's smile faltered. Because unlike some people, Hermione continued, voice low, I don't hide behind bloodlines and rumours. If I want to be somewhere, I go. If I want to be with someone, she glanced at Draco. I don't need to explain myself. Pansy blinked. You'll regret this. Probably, Hermione said. But not tonight. They walked in silence after Pansy left. At the stairwell, Draco stopped. You didn't have to do that. I know. But you did. She looked up at him, heart pounding again. I'm done pretending. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, voice hoarse, So am I. It didn't take long. By breakfast the next morning, the whispers had evolved into full conversations spoken just quietly enough to pretend they weren't meant to be heard. Hermione entered the great hall and felt it, the pause, like a ripple through the air as heads turned and conversations shifted mid-sentence. Draco wasn't there. She wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. She sat down next to Ginny, who stared at her with a too neutral expression. I'm not going to ask if it's true, Ginny said softly. But I will ask if it's worth it. Hermione hesitated. I don't know. Then I hope you find out before it ruins you. She was summoned again before noon. McGonagall's expression was harder this time. Miss Granger, she said, not unkindly, I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I asked for discretion. You've ignored that. I haven't done anything wrong. You've done something controversial, which, in this political climate, is just as dangerous. Hermione bit back her retort. She could feel the weight of the war in every word. Draco Malfoy is here under watch, not welcome, McGonagall continued. The Ministry sees him as a risk. If your name is tied to his, publicly or otherwise, your career, your influence, everything you've earned. I'm not here to please the Ministry, Hermione said sharply. No. But you are here to lead. And leaders must be wise, not just brave. McGonagall let the silence settle. I'm separating you two, she finally said. You'll no longer co-lead Unity sessions. You'll have different partners. Different schedules. This is non-negotiable. Hermione nodded once, tightly. She didn't cry until the door closed behind her. She found Draco that night in the library. Not in their corner. Not near the restricted section. Just alone, in the shadows of the history aisle, tracing the spine of a book he hadn't opened. When he looked up, his expression changed instantly. "They pulled you too," he said. She nodded. "I should have seen it coming." She walked toward him. "They think if we're separated, this will stop." He gave her a sad smile. "They're wrong." Hermione reached for his hand. He pulled her behind the shelves, into the narrow gap between stone and stories. Pressed her gently against the wall, their bodies close, hearts racing. "They can take the room," she whispered. "The title. The job. But they can't take this." His mouth hovered near hers. "Are you sure?" "No," she whispered. "But I want you anyway." They kissed, hungry, aching, desperate. She pressed her hands beneath his robes, feeling his heat through fabric. He cupped her face, devoured her mouth like he needed it to breathe. Her leg slid between his hand tracing her spine. For a moment it felt like everything might tip over the edge again. But then, footsteps. They froze. The prefect's voice called from the other side of the aisle. Hermione's chest heaved. Draco's lips brushed her ear. "One day," he whispered. "When there's no one left to stop us." She nodded, dazed. "Soon," she whispered. Then she turned and slipped away, heart still in his hands. Hermione found the letter tucked between the pages of Magical Reformation, post-war politics, where only someone who knew her that well would dare leave it. His handwriting was unmistakable, clean, sharp, almost too careful. Like he still wasn't sure he deserved the words he wrote. "If I asked you to meet me tonight, not because we have to, but because we both want to, would you come?" No pretense. No classroom. Just you. And me, midnight. Room of requirement. If you don't come, I'll understand. But gods, Granger. I hope you do. Her fingers trembled as she refolded the parchment. She pressed it to her lips, eyes fluttering shut. She didn't go to dinner. She didn't study. She just waited for the clock to strike 12. The castle was quiet at midnight, save for the echo of her footsteps as she crept through the 7th-floor corridor. Her heart thudded in time with every step. The room of requirement opened before she touched the wall. Inside was warmth. Not just magical firelight, but something more intimate, more deliberate. The walls were lined with bookshelves. A sofa near the fire. Candles hovered above them like stars. And at the center, a bed. Not elaborate. Not grand. Just soft. Welcoming. Real. And Draco. He stood by the far wall, still in his uniform shirt and slacks, hair falling over his eyes, hands clenched by his sides like he'd been standing that way for hours. When he turned and saw her, relief. Hunger. Fear. All at once. "You came," he said, like he hadn't let himself believe it. "I didn't want to lie to myself anymore," she whispered. They moved toward each other like gravity demanded it. When he kissed her, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't frantic. It was deliberate. His mouth tasted like hesitation and hope. His fingers threaded through her curls, holding her as if he thought she might disappear. She slid her hands beneath his shirt, feeling the scars across his ribs. He sucked in a breath when she kissed one. Then another. He peeled her jumper over her head slowly, reverently. When her bra joined it on the floor, he paused, not to stare but to see her. His voice was rough. "You're beautiful." She kissed him before he could say anything else. Their bodies moved in sync, not desperate but aching. When he laid her down, it wasn't conquest. It was surrender. He asked for permission with every touch. She gave it with every gasp. When he finally entered her, they both went still, breathing each other in, skin to skin. No more room for doubt or denial. Her fingers dug into his back as he moved. He whispered her name against her throat like it was sacred. She clung to him, legs wrapped tight, moaning into his mouth as he brought her closer to the edge. When she came, it was with his name on her lips, her voice breaking. He followed seconds later, a groan lost in her hair. They collapsed together, breathless, shaking. Neither said a word. Because nothing could match the truth their bodies had already told. They didn't sleep much that night. But when she did, tangled in his arms, his breath warm on her skin, Hermione didn't dream of war. Only him. Sunlight spilled into the room of requirement, like it had forgotten what they'd done the night before. Hermione blinked awake slowly, blinking against the warm glow. Her body ached, not from pain, but from pleasure. From honesty. From finally surrendering. Draco lay beside her, one arm draped loosely around her waist, the other resting above his head on the pillow. His breathing was slow. Peaceful. Vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. She studied his face in the quiet. The sharpness was still there, cheekbones like blades, a jaw built for biting remarks, but it was softened by sleep. By the way his lips were slightly parted. By the faintest trace of a smile tugging at one corner. She hadn't meant to fall for him. But somewhere between fire blossoms and forbidden glances, between arguments that turned to confessions and touches that turned into trembling, she had. And now she wasn't sure how to stop. Draco stirred just before sunrise. His hand skimmed across her bare back, fingertips tracing patterns like runes. "You're still here," he murmured. She smiled against his chest. "Would have been rude to leave after the best night of my life." He let out a low chuckle. "That's a shame. I was hoping to top it tonight." Her laughter faded as her thoughts returned to the outside world, the whispers, the stares, the warnings. "We can't stay hidden forever," she whispered. "I know. Someone's going to make us choose." He rolled onto his side and looked at her. "Then we choose. You make it sound easy. It's not. But you're the only thing I've ever wanted enough to fight for." Her heart stuttered. She didn't say "I love you." But she thought it. Deep in her bones. The room of requirement faded behind them an hour later, leaving only a dusty corridor and the sound of their retreating footsteps. They parted near the Great Hall. No kiss, no hand touch, just a glance. But that glance said everything. And someone saw it. The confrontation came by midday. Pansy again, this time with more venom in her voice, more witnesses in the corridor, more bite in her words. "You know, Granger," she said loudly, "it's one thing to shag a Death Eater, it's another to act like it's noble." Hermione froze, books clutched to her chest. A group of Ravenclaws slowed to listen. Draco, who'd been a few steps behind her, stopped. His face was unreadable. "Don't," Hermione said softly. But Pansy stepped closer. "Did he whisper sweet apologies into your ear while he fucked you? Or did you just close your eyes and pretend he wasn't the one who nearly got you killed?" Hermione dropped her books. The corridor went dead silent. Then she stepped forward. "I didn't close my eyes," she said, voice clear. "Because I wanted him, and I don't regret it." Gasps. A few stifled laughs. Someone muttered, "Bloody hell." Pansy blinked. "So it's true?" Hermione nodded. "Yes, it's true." Before anyone could respond, Draco was beside her. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. But the way he stood, tall, unashamed, defiant, said more than words could. Together, they walked away. That night, they didn't meet in secret. They met in the astronomy tower. In the open. Under stars. And when he kissed her there, anyone watching could see, it wasn't shame. It was choice. The castle buzzed like a hornet's nest. Some students treated it like a scandal worth savouring. Others avoided Hermione entirely, as though standing too close to her would taint their future careers. In the span of 24 hours, she became the girl who did the unthinkable. The girl who chose Draco Malfoy. At breakfast, Neville sat beside her. Quietly. Like he'd been waiting. He buttered a slice of toast, then said without looking up, "People forget you can fight in a war and still be wrong about people." Hermione blinked. "You think I'm wrong?" He shook his head. "I think you see something the rest of us don't." Then he passed her the jam. That was the first moment she breathed freely all morning. Draco handled it differently. With that cold, practiced mask he wore better than anyone. He walked the halls like nothing had changed, shoulders squared, chin lifted, eyes daring anyone to say a word. But Hermione saw the tension in his fingers, the bite in his voice when professors spoke too curtly, the extra beat he paused before entering any room she was in. He was used to being hated. He wasn't used to being hated with her. They were in the library when the letter arrived. An owl, official and pale grey, dropped it directly into her lap. No ceremony, no warning. She opened it with trembling hands. Miss Granger, the Ministry has been made aware of your ongoing personal entanglement with Mr. Draco Malfoy. Due to his provisional status and the high-profile nature of your own public image, we strongly advise you to cease all extracurricular interaction until the completion of your academic term. Failure to comply may affect your future ministry appointments. This is not a threat. It is a courtesy. Sincerely, Undersecretary Ottoman, Department of Magical Integrity. She read it twice, then tore it in half. Draco, who had been reading beside her, looked up. They sent it, she said. He didn't need to ask what it said. His jaw flexed. You should listen. I won't. Hermione, she stood. They want me to believe loving you is a risk. His eyes widened just slightly. You've never said it, he said, barely audible. She stepped closer. Neither have you. His throat moved. Because I thought it would make it harder. It does, she whispered. Then softly, like a vow. But I love you anyway. His hands reached for her without thought. He kissed her like he didn't know if he ever would again. And this time, she kissed him back like she didn't care who saw. He didn't say it back. Not that night. Not even after the kiss. They held hands all the way to the dungeons, fingers laced like armor. But when they reached the shadows of the Slytherin corridor, Draco pulled away. Hermione, he said too formally. She froze. What? His eyes didn't meet hers. Maybe this was a mistake. Her throat closed. You're joking. He stepped back. You have everything to lose. And you think that's your choice to make? I think loving me will break you. She took a shaky step forward. You think it hasn't already? His silence was deafening. I told you the truth, she whispered. And you're running. I'm protecting you. She stared at him like she didn't recognize the boy who'd once kissed her scars like promises. No, she said coldly. You're protecting yourself, again. Then she turned and walked away. He didn't sleep. Instead, Draco sat alone at the Black Lake, cloak soaked with dew, staring at his reflection in the water, like it might give him an answer. Love was not something he'd ever been taught to survive. It felt too much like war. Ron cornered him the next morning outside the potions classroom. No wand. No theatrics. Just fury in his fists and betrayal in his voice. You think I don't know what you're doing, he growled, slamming Draco against the stone wall. Draco didn't fight back. Ron's voice cracked. She forgave you. She chose you. And now you're going to disappear because it's easier. Draco winced. She deserves better. No, she deserves honesty. And if you're not man enough to give it to her, I will. Draco looked at him, eyes sharp now. You think you're protecting her? I'm not protecting her, Ron said, stepping back. I'm reminding her that she can survive without you. Draco straightened. Maybe she can, but I can't survive without her. Ron blinked. Then quietly, then go tell her. He found her in the library, pretending to study. She didn't look up as he approached. Don't, she murmured. If this is another noble monologue, it's not. She kept reading. I was wrong, he said. That made her pause. I thought I could keep you safe by leaving, that if I made it easy for the world to push me aside, it would make it easier for you to stand tall. He stepped closer. But you never needed me to move out of the way. Her fingers trembled on the page. I love you, Hermione. The words were quiet. Steady. Earned. Finally, she looked at him. Eyes glassy. Breath caught. and then relief. "You're a bloody idiot," she whispered. He smiled. "I'm your idiot." She stood, dropped her books and kissed him, right there, in full view of half the school. The whispers didn't matter anymore. The letter came sealed in gold wax. Ministry crest. Personal delivery. No owl this time, just a sharp-faced intern who looked like he'd been ordered not to make eye contact. Hermione opened it alone, behind the locked door of an empty study chamber in the library. "Miss Granger, due to increasing concerns regarding your public conduct and affiliations, we regret to inform you that your provisional offer with the Department of Magical Law Enforcement is being reviewed. A formal meeting with the Ministry Board of Ethics has been scheduled for next week. Attendance is mandatory. Respectfully, Undersecretary Ottoman, Department of Magical Integrity." She stared at the parchment. Not because she was surprised, but because a small part of her had hoped they wouldn't actually go through with it. Draco found her 2 hours later in the same chair, letter clenched in her hand, lips pressed into a white line. "Tell me," he said, already knowing. She handed it to him. His eyes scanned it quickly. When he finished, he didn't curse. Didn't yell. He just sat beside her, quietly. Then said, "This is my fault." "No," she said immediately. "Don't you dare. I should have stayed in the shadows. If you had, I would have chased you there." That earned the ghost of a smile. "Do you want me to go?" he asked. She turned to him, fury flickering in her eyes. "I want you to stay. I want a future where I don't have to choose." He reached for her hand, held it tightly. "You don't have to," he said. But they both knew that wasn't true. Later that night, McGonagall summoned her to her office. The room was dim, candlelight flickering on the stone walls. There was tea waiting. Always tea. And a silence that felt heavier than ever. "I've read the letter," McGonagall said without preamble. Hermione nodded. "I assume you've considered what this means." "I have." McGonagall studied her over the rim of her teacup. "You could still step back. Publicly denounce the relationship. Frame it as a lapse in judgment. They'd reinstate your offer immediately." Hermione stared at the fire. "And Draco?" McGonagall hesitated. "He's not on trial, but he is easy to target." "I won't do that," Hermione said, voice steady. "I won't build a career on pretending to hate someone I love." The headmistress didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Then prepare yourself, Miss Granger," she said quietly. "The world doesn't take kindly to women who choose fire over safety." Hermione stood. "Then let it burn." That night she met Draco in the astronomy tower. Rain was falling softly against the windows. The sky was black, clouds thick. No stars. Just them. "They're going to make me choose," she said. He looked at her. "Then don't, let me do it." Her eyes narrowed. "Draco, if I disappear—" "You do that," she interrupted, voice shaking. "And I swear to Merlin I'll find you and hex you into next year." A beat. Then he laughed. Not his usual mocking chuckle. A real laugh. Broken. Disbelieving. "You still scare me more than anyone else," he said. She stepped into his arms. "I should." The Ministry of Magic looked exactly the way Hermione remembered. Polished floors. Cold light. Voices echoing in marble chambers like ghosts in denial. But this time, she wasn't here to change the world. She was here to defend her right to love someone the world said she shouldn't. The hearing room was circular, lined with too many chairs and not enough faces she trusted. A long obsidian table sat at the centre, and behind it, 5 ministry officials in deep navy robes. Ottomane sat in the middle, lips pursed, quill poised, eyes sharp. Hermione stood alone before them. "We appreciate your cooperation, Miss Granger," Ottomane began smoothly. "Let us be clear, this is not a disciplinary hearing, merely clarification." "Clarify what exactly?" she asked. "Your judgment. Your affiliations. Your understanding of what it means to be a public figure, entrusted with the moral integrity of the new magical era." Hermione resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Instead, she said, "And what precisely is immoral about caring for someone?" Ottermain didn't blink. "You have chosen to associate with a former Death Eater, a young man who, while pardoned, remains under provisional supervision." "He was 16, she snapped. "He was raised in a home that worshipped Voldemort and used fear as currency." Ottermain's quill paused. Hermione continued. "And despite that, he came back. He took the heat. He walked the halls every day, knowing no one would speak to him. That doesn't make him dangerous. That makes him braver than most of you sitting here." One of the panel members cleared his throat. "You believe your personal relationship with Mr. Malfoy has no bearing on your professional trajectory." "I believe it reveals my character," Hermione said. "And my capacity to forgive." Ottermain smiled tightly. "Some would argue forgiveness and favoritism are dangerously close. Then those people don't understand what either word means." The room went quiet. And then the door opened. Every head turned. Draco Malfoy stepped into the hearing room in full view of the Ministry Board. His robes were black, his expression unreadable, but his hands didn't shake. Hermione's heart stopped. Ottermain stood. "Mr. Malfoy, you are not—" "I am," he interrupted. "This hearing is about me, so I should speak." The air shifted. Ottermain glared. "You are here under probationary, and yet no one seems to want to hear the truth," Draco said evenly. "You want to know what Hermione Granger's biggest crime is? Loving someone she shouldn't. Forgiving someone the rest of you abandoned." He turned to her. "And in front of everyone," he said, "she saved me. And I don't mean in the war. I mean every day after." Hermione felt the sting behind her eyes. Draco faced the panel again. "If you punish her for that, then you haven't changed at all. You've just rewritten the rules." Silence. Utter silence. Then Ottermain's voice clipped. "This meeting is adjourned. We will notify you of the board's decision within 72 hours. They walked out side by side. Not holding hands. Not touching. But more united than they'd ever been. They returned to Hogwarts under silence. No outpost. No punishment. No praise. Just eyes. Every hallway Hermione walked down felt like it narrowed. Every conversation paused the second she passed. Even the portraits seemed to lean closer, like they wanted to hear the story firsthand. Daily Prophet ran a headline 2 days later. "Golden Girl defends dark legacy. Hermione Granger's dangerous devotion." A grainy photo showed her walking out of the ministry chambers, Draco one step behind her. She looked exhausted. He looked like a threat. The article was worse. Biased. Bleeding. By lunchtime, someone had tacked a copy to the hallway bulletin board near the Great Hall. By dinner, someone had scribbled "blood traitor" across her history of magic essay in ink she couldn't remove. She didn't cry. Not in front of them. She waited until nightfall, climbed the astronomy tower alone, and screamed into the wind until her throat went raw. She hated that she was still this fragile. She hated that even now the world wanted her small. And most of all, she hated how deeply she still wanted to belong to a world that had no room for a heart like hers. Draco found her there. He didn't say anything. Just slipped off his cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders. She collapsed into him like a wave hitting shore. "I thought I could take it," she whispered. "You did." Her fists balled in his shirt. "They hate me. They don't know you. I'm tired." He kissed the top of her head. "And let me carry it for a while." They stood like that in the cold, wind biting their faces, but neither of them moved. Hermione had spent years being the strongest person in every room. And for once, she let herself rest. Later, they lay on the tower floor beneath an enchanted canopy of stars. She rested her head on his chest, fingers tracing slow circles over his sternum. "I've lost things before," she murmured. "Family. Friends. Safety. This feels different." He brushed her curls back from her face. "Because this time, you didn't lose it. You chose it." She looked up. "Do you regret it?" His answer was instant. Never. Her eyes welled again. Even if it ruins everything, he cupped her cheek. You are everything. Then he kissed her, slow and deep and sure. Not to claim her, but to remind her that she was still here. Still wanted. Still powerful, even when broken. Especially when broken. The verdict arrived in a sealed black envelope. McGonagall handed it to Hermione herself, her eyes unreadable behind her spectacles. It came with no fanfare, she said. But you may want to read it somewhere. Private. Hermione took the envelope with steady hands, though her stomach was in knots. She didn't open it until she reached the old classroom. Their classroom. Draco was already there, leaning against the far wall, his posture deceptively relaxed. She held the letter up wordlessly. His face tightened. You first. She broke the seal. Read. Then read it again. When she looked up, tears filled her eyes, but she was smiling. They're reinstating me, Draco blinked. What? She handed him the letter. On the condition that I agree to a mandatory ethics review course and formally accept a non-political position for my first year. His brow furrowed. That's their punishment. It's their compromise, she whispered. He looked stunned. They bent. They did, she said softly. Because of you. He handed the parchment back. Because of you, Hermione. But she shook her head. They expected me to beg. To fold. But you walked in there and told them the truth. And they couldn't argue with it. He stepped closer. So you're free. She took his hand. Not free. Chosen. That's the difference. That night they didn't celebrate in the room of requirement. They didn't hide. They took a bottle of fire whiskey from Seamus's stash, a blanket from the Gryffindor common room, and climbed to the astronomy tower as the stars blinked into existence overhead. They lay side by side, warmth between them, the city lights twinkling far beyond the hills. I always thought the world would burn if we ever did this, Draco said, voice low. Hermione looked over. And now? I think we burned the world, he murmured, and built something better from the ash. She smiled, then turned toward him. They kissed slowly. There was no urgency. No fear of being caught. Only quiet touches, soft laughter, whispered promises between sips of fire whiskey and fingers tangled in hair. When he unbuttoned her blouse, she didn't stop him. When she reached beneath his shirt, he trembled, but let her. They made love under the stars, slow and reverent. Not rushed. Not stolen. But claimed. Together. Afterward, wrapped in his arms beneath the blanket, she whispered into the crook of his neck. So what happens now? He pulled her closer. Now we live. And love? His voice was warm. Every bloody day. May arrived with the scent of wet grass and parchment ink. The castle buzzed with end-of-term chaos. Study groups in every corner. Spells whispered into textbooks, students sleepwalking through exams with ink-stained fingers and caffeine-fueled glares. Hermione should have felt in her element. Instead, she felt like she was running out of time. She and Draco had slipped into something resembling peace. No more hiding. No more whispers. The gossip had burned itself out, replaced with wary acceptance or open indifference. Even Ron had backed off, after Ginny threatened to hex his eyebrows off if he said one more word. They studied together when they could. They still met at the astronomy tower when they couldn't. But there was a quiet tension beneath every touch. Not fear, not guilt, just inevitability. Because Hogwarts had always been a bubble, enchanted, protected, suspended above reality. And it was about to burst. It hit her hardest one night while they were walking the grounds, hand in hand, the sun setting low behind the forbidden forest. He was quiet. Too quiet. She nudged him. What's on your mind? He didn't answer right away. Then, what happens after this? She stopped walking. So did he. She swallowed. You mean us? He nodded. She stared at him. What do you want to happen? I want to wake up next to you, he said. Every day. I want to walk through the streets with you and not care who stares. I want to build something that doesn't feel like penance. She stepped closer. Then we will. He looked down. You'll be in London, buried in law and bureaucracy. And you, still figuring out what the hell to do with myself. You could stay. I could follow. She searched his face. You want to? I want you, he said quietly. Everything else is negotiable. Her heart clenched. And for the first time she felt the pull of a future that didn't have to be carved from obligation, but from want. The next day she received her final offer from the ministry. A position in the Department of Magical Law. Full-time. Starting July 1st. She stared at the acceptance parchment for a long time, then walked straight to the dungeons. Draco answered the door shirtless and annoyed. Unless you're here to... Oh, he saw the envelope in her hands. His posture shifted. She handed it to him. It's official, he read it. Twice. Then nodded. That's good, he said. That's safe, she corrected. Not the same thing. He looked up. What are you saying? I'm saying, I want you there, with me. His expression didn't change, but his eyes did. I'm not your charity case. I know. I don't want to be the thing you fit into the edges of your life. You won't be, she said. You are the life. He kissed her before she could say another word. And when he pulled back, he whispered against her lips, Then I'll follow you anywhere. The great hall had never looked like this before. No floating candles. No enchanted ceiling. Just sunlight pouring in through high-arched windows and rows of chairs filled with students who had survived. 8th year graduation. Not official, not traditional, but deeply earned. McGonagall stood at the front, robes pressed, lips thinner than usual. But even she couldn't hide the faint shine in her eyes as she scanned the room. You are the first class in Hogwarts history to rebuild something rather than inherit it, she said. And I do not say this lightly. You've done it better than we could have imagined. Applause followed. Hermione clapped. Draco didn't. He was too busy watching her. When Hermione's name was called, she stepped forward to receive her certificate and a silver enchanted badge bearing the ministry's seal. McGonagall held her hand for an extra beat, then slipped something into her palm. Hermione blinked. A folded note. No seal. She didn't open it until she returned to her seat. Miss Granger, you broke rules, yes. But more importantly, you rewrote them with grace. We do not always say it, but we notice. We are grateful. And I personally am proud of you. M.M. Hermione stared at the words for a long moment, then passed the note to Draco. He read it, smiled, and for the first time since they'd arrived at Hogwarts, she saw him relax. Like maybe, for once, he believed he belonged here too. After the ceremony, students spilled out into the courtyard. Laughing. Crying. Taking pictures with enchanted cameras that floated and clicked like excited fairies. Hermione and Draco stood off to the side, fingers barely brushing. Do you think this is where the real battle begins? She asked. Draco smirked. No. The battle was choosing to stay. This is where we find out what happens when we finally get to want things. She leaned into him. What do you want? He didn't hesitate. A flat in the city. A couch we never sit on because we're always in bed. You in nothing but my shirt reading case law and rolling your eyes at me. Hermione flushed. That's oddly specific. I've had time to think. She looked up at him. And what do you think happens next? He took her hand fully now, interlacing their fingers. I think we walk out of here, he said, and never look back. They did. Together. Through the castle gates. Into the world. No longer hiding. No longer afraid. Two people, scarred, stubborn, reckless in the way only survivors can be, who chose love over legacy. And knew they would do it again. Every time. The flat was a third-floor walk-up in Bloomsbury, just a few blocks from the ministry. Brick-walled, draughty, full of charm and uneven floorboards. It smelled like dust and fresh paint. Hermione loved it immediately. Draco looked at the stairs and said, "We're buying a bloody broomstick." They signed the lease 2 days after moving to London. Hermione's ministry orientation began the following week. Draco? He didn't have a job. Yet. He had something better. Freedom. Their first week was chaotic. Boxes everywhere. Dishes stacked on the floor. No curtains, no wards, no working wireless. But there was laughter. There were stolen kisses between spellwork and arguments over where to hang the bookshelves. There was Draco standing shirtless in the kitchen, cursing at a muggle kettle like it had personally insulted his bloodline. "You know you could boil water with your wand," Hermione said, amused. "I'm trying to assimilate," he muttered. "You look like you're trying to seduce it." He turned. "Is it working?" she flushed. "Maybe." They made love on the living room rug before the bed was built. They fell asleep on the couch surrounded by unopened boxes. They spent Sunday mornings tangled in sheets, reading aloud to each other, sometimes poetry, sometimes legal theory, sometimes the back of cereal boxes when they were too tired to care. It was soft. Unhurried. Real. One evening, Hermione came home late, shoulders tight, heels in hand, hair a tangled mess of rain and exhaustion. She found Draco sprawled on the couch, one arm over his eyes, the other lazily stirring a mug of something that looked alarmingly purple. He cracked one eye open. "You look like death in kitten heels," she groaned. "The Wizengamot Committee is trying to roll back transparency legislation again." He sat up. "Do I need to duel someone?" She dropped beside him with a sigh. "Maybe tomorrow." He handed her the mug. "Drink this," she sniffed. "What is it?" "I asked the teapot for liquid comfort. That's what it gave me." She sipped. It tasted like sugar, cloves, and something that burned all the way down. Hermione leaned into him, eyes closing. "This feels dangerous," she murmured. "What does? This?" "Us. Being happy." He brushed a kiss against her temple. "Then let's be dangerous." Later, when she fell asleep in his arms, books open on her chest and rain tapping softly at the windows, Draco whispered into her hair, "I'd fight the war all over again, if it meant finding you at the end of it." It started with something small. Hermione came home late again. Ministry deadlines, a rushed case briefing, and a last-minute flu call from Kingsley. She was drained, soaked, and shivering when she stepped into the flat. Draco was in the kitchen. He turned as the door clicked open, jaw tight, arms crossed. "You said 7. Hermione didn't even take off her cloak. "It was out of my control." "You said we'd have dinner." "I didn't know the meeting would run long." "You didn't owl." "I didn't think I had to." He stared at her. "That's the problem." The silence crackled. She dropped her bag onto the table, cloak dripping on the floor. "I'm trying," she said, voice shaking with cold and something else. "I'm doing my best. So am I," he snapped. "Do you think it's easy? Being here? Living in this world, your world, 1 foot always outside the door, like I'm some temporary indulgence you'll grow out of." Hermione froze. Draco's breath came hard. He hadn't meant to say that. But it was too late. Her voice dropped. "Is that what you think you are?" "No," he said bitterly. "It's what they think. And sometimes, when you don't come home, when you don't call, I start to believe it too." She stepped forward. "You're not temporary. Don't you dare think that." He shook his head. "I watch you turn yourself inside out to be perfect for them. For the ministry. For the world. And then you come home and I'm what's left." "You're what I choose," she snapped. "Then why does it feel like I'm the life you retreat to, not the one you live?" The words landed like a curse. She stared at him, breath caught, heart thudding. "I love you," she said quietly. "I know," he whispered. "But sometimes love doesn't feel like enough." She left the room. Not because she wanted to. Because she was afraid if she stayed, she'd say something she couldn't take back. Hours passed. He sat in the dark, She sat in their room, curled against the door. Eventually she opened it and found him already waiting on the other side. "I'm sorry," he said first. "So am I," she said. They met in the middle of the hallway. No shouting. No grand speeches. Just arms. Just breath. Just two broken people clinging to the one thing they knew how to hold. Each other. Later in bed, she whispered into his chest, "What if we ruin this?" He kissed her forehead. "Then we rebuild it." The morning after the fight was quieter than usual. Not tense. Just careful. Draco rose before her and padded barefoot into the kitchen, wand flicking absently to start the kettle. He didn't trust the Muggle one anymore after it hissed at him last week. Hermione appeared 10 minutes later, still in her oversized ministry tee and one sock, hair a mess, eyes half shut. He slid a mug toward her. Peace offering. She took it silently, cradling it in her hands like warmth itself. Then she leaned up and kissed him on the cheek. "You make the worst tea I've ever tasted." His mouth twitched. "And yet you keep drinking it. It's the effort that counts." They didn't talk about the fight. Not that day. Not because they were avoiding it, but because sometimes love didn't need to be dissected to be understood. Instead, they existed in quiet tandem. She worked on a case file at the kitchen table, scribbling notes and occasionally swearing under her breath when the ink smudged. He sprawled across the sofa, reading a battered copy of Wuthering Heights she'd left on his nightstand weeks ago. He'd never admitted aloud, but he liked the mess of it, the aching, the madness, the way even cruel love had weight. "Mid-afternoon," she asked. "Did you eat anything today?" He replied, "I had half a biscuit and the rest of last night's guilt." She rolled her eyes and summoned soup. They ate on the balcony in mismatched chairs, knees touching, bowls balanced on their thighs. After dinner, he lit the fire and she curled into his side, her fingers absently tracing patterns along his forearm. "Do you think it'll always be this hard?" she asked. "Probably. And still worth it?" He pressed his lips to her forehead. "Absolutely," she nodded against his chest. Okay, they didn't need more than that. That night, as they got into bed, she watched him strip down to his boxers and pull on the old slithering green sleep shirt she secretly loved him in. He caught her staring. "What?" he said. She smirked. "Just thinking. Dangerous habit. I like the way you look when you don't realize you're being loved." He stilled, then reached out and pulled her against him. "Don't stop," he whispered. She kissed his chest. Never. The world outside still judged them. Still whispered. But inside their tiny flat, with ink-stained hands and burnt toast and shared silence, Hermione and Draco were building something bigger than redemption. They were building home. The knock came just after noon. Hermione looked up from her parchment-strewn workspace in the living room. "Expecting anyone?" Draco glanced over from the kitchen, where he was mid-stir of something vaguely edible. No, he opened the door. And froze. On the threshold stood a man with white blonde hair, a pressed black coat, and the unmistakable air of pure-blood pedigree. Lucius Malfoy. Older. Harsher. Eyes like polished steel. "Father," Draco said flatly. Hermione stood immediately. Lucius's gaze flicked over to her, assessing, sharp. "This is the Granger girl, then?" Hermione lifted her chin. "Woman, but yes." Lucius didn't acknowledge the correction. "May I come in?" Draco hesitated for a breath, then stepped aside. The tension in the flat was instant. Thick. Lucius remained standing, glancing around the room like it offended him. The mismatched furniture. The Muggle kettle. The stack of books on the floor. "You've fallen far," he murmured. Draco didn't react. "I'm exactly where I want to be." "You mean with her?" Lucius's voice held just enough disgust to make Hermione's spine stiffen. Draco stepped in front of her, a quiet warning in his stance. "I didn't come to fight," Lucius said, lifting a hand. "I came to offer you something." "I'm not interested." Lucius reached into his coat and produced a parchment scroll, tied in emerald ribbon. He laid it on the table. A position. In Paris. Private firm. Old magic. They'll take you. No questions. High salary. Respect. And distance. Hermione blinked. Distance. Lucius looked at her now.
You must realize you're not doing him any favors.
Draco's voice turned ice. Stop talking to her like she's not in the room. You're wasting potential, Lucius snapped. For what? A name that still divides the world. For a woman whose blood still makes some doors close before they open. Hermione stepped forward now, calm but firm. If those doors close, they're not worth opening. Lucius's lip curled. Your arrogance is only matched by your delusions. Draco moved without thinking, grabbing the parchment scroll and tossing it directly into the fire. Lucius didn't flinch. You made your choice then, he said. Draco nodded. No, you did. Years ago. I'm just choosing differently now. Lucius's gaze lingered a second too long. Then he turned and left without another word. The door shut. The silence that followed felt like smoke. Hermione moved to Draco's side. Are you okay? He didn't answer right away. Then slowly. I always thought he'd stop trying. You scare him now, she said gently. Because you're not his reflection anymore. Draco turned to her and pulled her into his arms. Don't ever let me be that man, he whispered. She kissed the corner of his mouth. You never were. That night he held her tighter than usual. And she let him. Because even the strongest parts of us sometimes need to be reminded. We are not who we came from. We are who we choose to become. The next morning, Draco didn't get out of bed. Not right away. Not even when sunlight crept through the curtains or when Hermione left a mug of tea on the nightstand, untouched and cooling. He lay still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling like it might crack and bury him. The shadows of Lucius's words hung in the corners of the room, thick and quiet and sharp. You've fallen far. Draco had replayed that sentence a dozen times already. Because the truth was, part of him still believed it. Not the part that loved Hermione. Not the part that stayed. But the part that had been raised on power, polished in pride, and taught to measure worth by blood and lineage. That part still whispered, you're not enough for her. Hermione returned after an early ministry briefing, setting her briefcase down with a thud. You haven't moved, she said, standing in the doorway. I'm thinking. She folded her arms. Dangerous habit. He didn't smile. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. Say it. He stared at the ceiling. Say what? What you're afraid of. He didn't move. That he's right. Hermione said nothing. Draco exhaled. That I'm a shadow of the man you should be with. That no matter what I do, what I build, I'll always be the thing people tolerate beside you. Never equal. Never good enough. Silence. Then she reached out and slid her hand into his. Warm. Steady. Draco. He turned his head slightly. Just enough to see her. She leaned closer. You are not a shadow. You are the first real thing I've ever let myself love. He swallowed hard. You think I chose you in spite of your past, she said. But I chose you because of who you've become after it. He blinked rapidly. You get to define yourself now, she whispered. No one else. Not him. Not the world. Not even me, a beat. Then, do you believe me? She asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he sat up slowly, reaching for her, pulling her into his lap. His mouth met hers in a kiss that wasn't about hunger or apology. It was about faith. About the fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, he could deserve this. Her. Life. Peace. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I want to believe it, he said quietly. Then I'll believe it enough for both of us, she whispered. Until you can. That night, she found him at the kitchen table, scribbling notes in a worn black notebook. What's that? She asked. He looked up. then slid the notebook toward her. A business plan. No magic. Just ink and vision. A private consultancy firm. International. Research, artifacts, restoration. Ancient magic with a new purpose. She raised a brow. You're starting a company, he nodded. I want something that's mine, that we can be proud of. Her heart swelled. She closed the notebook and kissed him like she already believed it would succeed. Hogwarts looked different in the fall. Maybe it was the way the trees had turned amber and gold, or the soft way the wind moved through the towers. Or maybe it was because for the first time, Hermione and Draco returned not as students, but as something else entirely. Guests. Invited to speak at a Unity Program alumni panel. Unity Program, Draco muttered as they walked through the front gates. Still the worst name they could have chosen. Hermione bumped her shoulder into his. It worked, didn't it? He glanced sideways at her. Did it? She smiled. You're wearing a tie, Malfoy. I think it worked a little. He tugged at it dramatically. Under protest. The panel was small, mostly 8th-year returners, and a few new 7th years who listened with wide eyes as Hermione talked about ethics and ministry reform, and Draco, with far less polish, spoke about rebuilding your life after public infamy. I think the most important lesson, he said slowly, is that no one ever tells you what comes after redemption. That it's messy and ongoing. And sometimes you still wake up expecting the world to hate you. The room was quiet. Then he glanced at Hermione, lips quirking. But sometimes, you wake up next to someone who reminds you it doesn't matter. The students clapped. Hermione blushed. Later in the courtyard where they once argued under moonlight, she asked, Did you plan that? He shrugged. Maybe I just like watching you blush in public. She rolled her eyes. Still insufferable. And yet, still yours. They stayed the night in one of the old guest chambers. McGonagall insisted. Hermione stood by the window long after midnight, staring at the grounds, remembering fire blossoms and first kisses, and the time he told her, Tell me to stop. Draco came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. We've changed, she whispered. Yes, he murmured into her hair. But not enough to forget. She turned in his arms. His eyes searched hers. Then suddenly, but not rushed, he sank to one knee. Her breath caught. He pulled a small, simple ring from his pocket. Platinum. No gems. Just quiet strength. I don't have a famous name to give you, he said. No legacy worth inheriting. But I have this life. The one we built. And I want it to be yours. Hermione stared down at him, heart thudding. Marry me, she blinked rapidly. You didn't even ask if I wanted that. His eyes softened. I already know you don't need me. Pause. But I'm hoping you still want me. Tears welled in her eyes. I do. And when she kissed him, right there in the castle that once tore them apart, he felt like maybe, finally, they had rewritten everything. The news spread faster than a profit leak. Not because they announced it with fanfare, but because Ginny Weasley spotted the ring over brunch and screamed loud enough to rattle every teacup in Diagon Alley. Is that a ring? She shrieked. Hermione flushed. Yes. Oh my, you're getting married! Across the table, Draco grimaced. Could you not yell it like it's a scandal? Ginny blinked. Malfoy, you are the scandal. Ron choked on his butterbeer. But he didn't storm out. Instead, he leaned forward and said, voice tight, You're serious? Hermione nodded. I am. Ron studied her, then looked at Draco. If you hurt her, I know, Draco said quietly. And I won't. A long pause. Then Ron sighed. All right. I'll come to the wedding. But I'm not wearing green. Hermione laughed. Deal. Telling Narcissa was easier than expected. She came to the flat a few days later, cloaked in cool elegance and frost-laced perfume. When Hermione showed her the ring, the older woman's only reaction was a long, unreadable look. Then, he used to practice proposing spells in his room when he was 9. Draco groaned. Mother, Hermione blinked. He what? I'm leaving, he muttered, disappearing into the kitchen. Narcissa turned to her with a rare smile. You've softened him. No, Hermione said. He just finally let someone see the soft that was always there. Narcissa nodded. You're a brave girl. Woman, Hermione corrected again. This time Narcissa nodded with more warmth. Yes, and soon a very brave bride. Lucius sent no owl. But the silence felt like its own kind of answer. Draco didn't flinch. Not anymore. They began planning that night, on the floor, with parchment scrolls and enchanted magazines and a bottle of cheap wine. Hermione claimed was part of the aesthetic. We're not doing a pure blood affair, she said. Obviously. And no ministry gala vibes. Agreed. I want a garden. I want it to be small. I want to write our own vows. He smiled. I want to hear them. They stayed up until 2 a.m. picking colours, names for tables, and arguing about whether they should allow dancing. They would. Until Hermione fell asleep with her head on his shoulder and his wand tracing lazy sparks above them. And for once the future didn't feel impossible. It felt invited. The garden wasn't grand. It was tucked behind a modest cottage just outside of Ottery St. Catchpole, surrounded by a stone wall covered in ivy. Lavender grew wild beneath the trees. Fireflies blinked like fairy lights as dusk fell slow and golden. Hermione stood in front of the mirror, breath caught in her chest. She wore ivory. No frills. No train. Just simplicity wrapped in quiet confidence. Ginny tightened the back of the dress. You ready? No, Hermione whispered. But I want to be. Ginny smiled. That's what matters. Draco waited beneath an archway of charmed roses that bloomed on cue, his hands pressed together so tightly. Hermione could see the pale line where his signet ring had once sat. When she stepped into view, the world stopped. Not because of the dress. Not because of the crowd. Because she was his. And she had chosen him. Again and again. He nearly forgot to breathe. The guest list was small. Harry. Ron. Luna. Neville. Blaise, reluctantly invited but surprisingly respectful. Narcissa sat in the front row in Slytherin green with a matching silk handkerchief. McGonagall wore tartan and looked like she was barely holding it together. The chair meant for Lucius stayed empty. No one mentioned it. The ceremony was brief. No priest. No ancient script. Just hands clasped and hearts full. Hermione went first. When I first met you, I thought you were everything I hated. Arrogant. Cold. Cruel. And maybe you were then. But I've watched you become the kind of man who can look at his past and still move forward. You are the choice I make with open eyes, open scars, and open arms. You are my peace, my fire, and my home. I love you. Draco's eyes shimmered as he replied. I never believed in redemption. Not really. But then you looked at me, really looked, and didn't turn away. You saw the worst of me and gave me your best. I spent years building walls to keep the world out. You broke them with kindness, with fire, with truth. I love you. And I will spend the rest of my life earning that love. They kissed. The applause felt like the closing of one chapter and the quiet opening of the next. Later, under floating lanterns and a sky full of stars, they danced barefoot on the grass. Hermione whispered into his ear. We made it. He held her tighter. We chose it. And when the music faded, and the night wrapped around them like a spell, Draco pressed his forehead to hers and said, just loud enough for her to hear, This isn't the end. And she whispered back, No, it's the beginning.